This is Blues Guy for you today. Let's see if I can fix myself up here a little bit to be a bit more presentable. All right, this is Blues Guy, and today I'm going to talk about my passion, blues and FLARE network. Xrp Australia to be precise, because we had not long ago a conference in Australia about XRP, and of course two main characters were, well actually three good people were there. Hugo Fillion from FLARE network, and of course Russ Edwards, the big gun from XRP Ripple, and Crypto Area Japan. Oh my god, I love her, she is amazing. She's got a lot of subscribers on YouTube. She's making a lot of videos on FLARE network. She was actually the first one to acknowledge and find that Hugo and FLARE network were the big deal. So she's talking and asking those two guys to question what DeFi do and what value DeFi will bring to the users. Oh my goodness. FLARE network, let your XRP works for you, and this is why I'm so bullish on FLARE network and XRP, my friend. Without further ado, like and subscribe, I don't know where that thing is, and share the video. I post a link of Crypto Aries videos and link about our YouTube channel in the description, so make sure you follow her as well. All right. Oh yeah, this is Blues Guy. Let's go, baby. Let's go.
As everyone knows, the XRP community is quite loyal and very has side eyes to people who are coming in, you know, and they did that to Hugo. Hugo had a lot of hurdles to jump over, and yeah, I was very much, to be honest with you, I saw his vision in the F asset, and I put my reputation on the line to say, hey, community, this guy's for real. And you need to believe in him. And thank you for not...
No, thank you.
for coming through with that.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, very good. Here we go. This is really going to go fast. So the first question I have in this beyond traditional finance is, what is the value that DeFi brings to the digital asset XRP? Ross, I'm going to start with you first.
Thanks, Ari. I mean, obviously, that's a very important question at this conference and for this panel. So the impact of DeFi on XRP spans both direct utility and indirect utility. And I think the direct utility is probably the easier to understand and is pretty clear-cut. By bringing institutional DeFi to XRP and XRPL, we're driving the backbone of a huge financial ecosystem. Institutions bring large numbers of assets, large numbers of users, which means wallets, and large volumes of transactions. Now, XRP is first and foremost a control on resources on the XRPL ecosystem. They're consumed or held through reserves of assets on-chain. They're consumed and burnt through transaction fees. So bringing these objects and these transactions to the ledger are consuming an XRP and driving direct value into XRP as a token. Now, whilst XRP is first and foremost a control on XRPL resources, it's also another really important thing. It's a source of capital, and it's actually a really neutral, mobile piece of source of capital. And that's where the indirect utility is really driven from. Ripple has been working on payments for over a decade, just whilst I've been at the company. And a lot of those payments are being moving value throughout the world using XRP, right? Trading fiat against XRP directly. Primarily, that's been through centralized exchanges for liquidity purposes, but we're increasingly, as Monica referred to before, pushing this onto DeFi activity on the ledger. We're also in the midst of launching the native lending protocol on XRPL. And we see XRP as a huge source of capital to be lending and borrowing and using as collateral positions on chain. So again, being used as a source of capital to drive institutional markets. And we heard Ashish previously talk about Evernorth's role and vision in being a major source of capital in the form of XRP. And we're working with prime brokers and other financial institutions out there that can effectively utilize XRP downchain, using it as collateral, using it as positions in the market that can be advantageous over money and assets in the traditional finance world. So we're seeing that double-edged sword where we're getting direct and indirect utility for XRP.
So I think I'd echo a lot of those sentiments, but I think, you know, when we set out to build FLARE, we set out to turn XRP into collateral. You know, today XRP is not widely used as collateral. It has a value, and it has pretty much all the characteristics you want from collateral, but it's not widely used as collateral. There's very few places where you can deposit your XRP and get some other asset. What FLARE has built and what we continue to build is effectively it's a set of rails that is different to the XRPL for FLARE to be used as both collateral and, you know, to be traded. And that's absolutely a critical evolution, I think, in the assets valuation story. Now, I'm allowed to talk about XRP valuation, you're not, but because you work for Ripple. But once XRP becomes collateral, it gets another source of value. That is absolutely critical to understand here. And that's what DeFi can do for the asset that is XRP. It can give it a whole nother source of value, which it, you know, does not have today. And that's what we're trying to build out at FLARE through perhaps your institutions and the institutions we look to serve are slightly different. We serve retail, people like you who want to use your XRP, get yield on it, or borrow against it. And exchanges who hold 60 to 70% of the XRP that exists. So for us, exchanges are a vast source of potential assets that come to FLARE. That doesn't mean that we also don't think we can serve, you know, your institutional clients. We do, especially with the compute layer, for things that is not feasible on the XRP ledger. So we think that there's a very nice synergistic position between FLARE and the XRP ledger.
Thank you, everyone, for making it along today. It's a super exciting event. I'm Russ Edwards. I work for Ripple out of the Sydney office here. I'm not sure many people are aware, but Sydney was actually the first international office that Ripple opened way back in 2015. And so I came to Ripple with experience in payments, which is fairly obvious, I think, coming into Ripple then, and also previous experience in custody banking and fund admin. So I've worked across most areas and product lines of Ripple. And most recently, over the last few years, I've been working as part of BD in driving forward the agenda on stablecoins, tokenization, and institutional DeFi. And I also run our global team of partner engineers in the Ripple X space who are working with startups, fintechs, all the way to the largest financial institutions in the world when they're integrating and building things on XRPL.
Very nice.
So, yeah, my name's Hugo. I think you may have established that by now. I think my background was I was in finance. I was a commodity derivatives trader. And I studied risk management, mathematics in order to get there. And so my background is very much thinking about risk and about, you know, how financial systems work and where risk crops up and how it's present, and then thinking about, okay, well, how do I make money from that? That was my background. I then went to study machine learning, and I didn't want to go and work for a machine learning company when I left. I wanted to go into crypto. And I found two people at that university to come with me, and we founded FLARE. And we spent a long time thinking, okay, well, what should we build? What's being built? What's the use case of this technology? Why does it matter? And what can specifically, where is there somewhere we can build? We were very interested in interoperability. You know, at the time, and still today, Bitcoin and XRP represent a vast amount of money that does not have, full smart contract capabilities. And we really set our sights on how do we change that. We ended up building FLARE, and we kind of came from nowhere and hit the XRP community with this idea. And Ari picked this up and was the first person that interviewed me. So kind of owe my media presence from Ari's first interview, which is interesting.
The follow-up to that, because that was addressing what does DeFi do for the digital asset XRP, but I think it's important, since we've got this huge audience that are part of the users, if I could follow up then, what is the value to the users in particular for DeFi? Russ.
So I think that that's obviously a really important question, because that's ultimately going to drive the value through to XRP. So really the fundamental difference between DeFi and traditional finance is who's in control, right? In traditional finance, you're passing over control to a set of financial institutions. And in fact, if you look at TradFi processes and products and services, it requires an orchestration, and this is all financial services, it requires an orchestration of financial institutions and financial service providers coming together to deliver that service ultimately to the end user. DeFi is relying on math and code to do this, right? It's more deterministic. It's not dependent on operations of financial institutions and decisions of financial institutions and errors of financial institutions and these things. So if you are able to remove this choreography and alignment required between these financial institutions, and actually remove the involvement of most of these financial institutions altogether, think about what that means, right? The most simple thing, and I'm sure you've heard this about DeFi, is it can be cheaper, right? Suddenly you've got many financial institutional intermediaries that have their hand out removed from the process. But that's only the tip of the iceberg, right? Because you look deeper under the hood and you'll see that just the fundamentals are much easier. Services such as 24/7 real-time, I very much am not a believer that you can do this magically on DeFi and you can't do it in TradFi. But to do these things in TradFi require the cooperation of all of these different financial institutions, the uplift of all their technologies, of all their services, and that takes a long time and costs a lot of money, right? Instant payments here in Australia, MPP, took 5+ years to build and reportedly $1 billion plus. You know what works 24/7 real time? Math and code, and hence stablecoins. If you think about accessibility, suddenly you're taking away all of these financial institutions having to onboard parties, having to make profits of people, and these services become much, much more accessible. But by far the biggest differentiator when you take away that orchestration and the need for all of these institutions to keep up is the ability to build new innovative services. There's such a low barrier of entry of building a new service when we're using DeFi, and we're not reliant on all of these large institutions making huge investment decisions and lots of change programs to be able to just deliver new innovative services to the user. And I think that that is the most important difference.
Yeah, I think what we've learned is that money should flow, right? At the moment, in the traditional finance industry, is very siloed, fragmented. You want to move bank, you've got to go and take your passport and your utility bills, and it's a pain. It's hassle. What DeFi gives you, what rails like XRP Ledger and FLARE gives you, is the ability to interact with on FLARE protocols, on XRP Ledger potentially multiple institutions, with the lowest friction possible. That's critical. Like, for instance, I have a bank that I put my fiat currency into. It pays terrible interest. I would love to go to another bank, but I simply don't have the time to go and onboard. So that's kind of one of the core uses of DeFi. I think from the FLARE perspective, with regards specifically to XRP, what we let you do is we let you put your XRP to work, either to get yield on it or to borrow against it. And that's, two use cases that are, quite powerful, especially when you start thinking through the consequences of what being able to utilize $150 billion asset starts to look like. Everything I can show you with regards to the applications that are on FLARE, they're basically, how do I use XRP? How can I make it more productive for me?